My name is Camila Reyes, and I am 28 years old, when my life nearly ends in a grocery store aisle. One second I am reaching for a carton of eggs, and the next my vision narrows, my chest tightens, and the world tilts hard to the left. I wake up under bright hospital lights, with a nurse calling my name, and a doctor speaking fast about something called an aortic dissection. He tells me it is an emergency, and they need consent for surgery right now. I try to answer, but my mouth feels dry, and my arms feel heavy, like the air has turned to sand. The staff asks for my emergency contact, because they need someone to make decisions if I cannot. My chart has my sister listed, Brooke Reyes, because my parents insisted years ago that family should always be first. A nurse steps out to call her, and I listen to the muffled voice through the curtain, waiting for the sound of concern. What comes back is worse than silence. Brooke answers, then says, in a flat tone, that I am not her problem anymore. She tells the nurse to remove her number from my file, and she hangs up. The nurse returns with a careful face, and I can tell she is trying not to show shock. My stomach drops, and for a moment, the fear is not about surgery. It is about the truth I kept avoiding. My father, Daniel Reyes, and my mother, Karen Reyes, have always treated me like I was difficult, because I was born with heart problems and needed extra care. Brooke was the easy one, the golden one, and I was the fragile one they complained about in private. I spent years trying to earn normal love, by being quiet, by not asking for help, by smiling through pain. Now, I am lying in a hospital bed, about to be cut open, and my own sister just erased me with one sentence. The doctor asks again if there is anyone else, and my mind flashes to one name I have not said out loud in years. My uncle Victor Reyes, my father's younger brother. The man my parents cut off after an old family feud. I whisper his name anyway, because I have nothing left to lose. A nurse dials the number, and I stare at the ceiling, counting breaths, wondering if anyone will answer in time. The nurse dialed, and I could hear the phone ringing through the line. My heart hammered, and every second felt too long. Then a man answered, and his voice was alert, not sleepy. He said, "This is Victor Reyes who was calling." The nurse explained quickly, and I watched her face change as if relief arrived. Victor did not ask why he was listed, and he did not hesitate. He asked where I was, what the doctors said, and what they needed. The nurse told him the hospital name and the urgency in the room. Victor said he was coming now, and he asked the nurse to put the doctor on. The doctor spoke in short medical phrases, and Victor listened like he was taking notes. He asked about survival odds, the timing window, and consent. Then Victor said clearly that he approved emergency surgery, and he would sign everything in person when he arrived. When the call ended, the nurse squeezed my hand gently and told me I was not alone anymore. I tried to thank her, but my throat tightened and tears burned behind my eyes. A surgical team rolled me down the hallway, lights passing overhead like a fast-moving tunnel. The anesthesiologist spoke softly, telling me to count breaths. I thought about Daniel Reyes and Karen Reyes, and the way they always acted burdened by my body. I thought about Brooke Reyes, and how easy it was for her to hang up. Then I thought about Victor, the uncle I barely knew, choosing me without conditions. The last thing I remember is the cold of the operating room, and the pressure of a mask. When I woke up again, my chest hurt in a deep, heavy way, like an ache inside bone. A nurse told me the surgery was done, and I was in intensive care. My mouth was dry, my arms were weak, and my mind felt slow. Hours later, Victor appeared at my bedside, hair messy, eyes red, like he had run through a storm. He did not make a speech, and he did not ask me to explain anything. He just said, "You are here." That is what matters. He told me he had signed paperwork, spoke with surgeons, and arranged follow-up care. He also told me something that made my stomach drop again. He said the hospital tried calling my parents, and they never answered. He said the staff called Brooke again, and she repeated the same cold refusal. Victor looked at me with quiet anger and said, "I will handle the rest. You focus on breathing." I nodded, and I let my eyes close, because for the first time in years, someone was carrying me. The days after surgery moved in fragments, alarms, vital checks, and pain that rose and fell. I drifted in and out, while nurses adjusted medication and watched my heart rhythm closely. Victor Reyes stayed nearby, sitting in a chair, working on his phone, then looking up every time I stirred. He brought a small bag with lip balm, soft socks, and a phone charger, the kind of care that feels personal. On the third day, I could speak more clearly, and I asked the question I feared. I asked if Daniel Reyes and Karen Reyes knew I almost died. Victor paused, then told me the truth without dressing it up. He said they were contacted, and they chose not to come. He said, Karen asked if I was stable, then said she could not deal with drama. He said, Daniel said it was not their responsibility anymore, because I always had health issues. Hearing that made my chest ache in a different way, sharper than the incision. Victor looked at me and said, "You are allowed to be angry, but do not let anger slow your healing." Later that night, a nurse helped me sit up, and Victor handed me my phone. I opened social media, hoping for nothing, expecting nothing, and still getting hurt. Brooke Reyes had posted a photo, smiling at a restaurant table with Daniel and Karen beside her. The caption was about family time, blessings, and moving forward. Under it, people commented hearts and praise, and nobody mentioned me. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. I scrolled further, and I saw a longer post from Brooke, written like a confession. She said her sister had chosen to distance herself, and she asked everyone to respect boundaries. She implied I was unstable, and that the family had tried everything. It was a clean lie, polished for strangers. Victor read it over my shoulder, and his jaw tightened. He asked if I wanted him to respond, and I said no, not yet. I was too weak to fight on their stage, and I did not want to give them my energy. Victor nodded, then said, "We will document it, and we will wait." He told me that people who abandon you in crisis will often rewrite the crisis because the truth makes them look cruel. The next morning, a physical therapist helped me stand for a few seconds, and I felt dizzy but determined. Victor told me the doctors expected a long recovery, and he offered me a place to stay, if needed. He said his wife Elaine Parker would help, and they would keep things calm. I stared at him, shocked by the steadiness of that offer. I had spent my whole life begging for scraps of care from my parents, and now I was being offered real support by the man they cut off. In that moment, I understood something simple and brutal. Family is not who shares your last name. Family is who shows up when you cannot stand. When the doctors finally cleared me to leave, my body still felt fragile. My chest was wrapped, my steps were slow, and my energy vanished without warning. Victor Reyes arrived early with Elaine Parker, carrying paperwork and a calm smile. Elaine spoke gently, asking what I needed, and she made the room feel less clinical. A nurse reviewed my medication schedule, and Victor wrote it down carefully. He asked about follow-up appointments, cardiac rehab, and warning signs, like he was building a safety net. When I left the hospital, there was no crowd, no balloons, no parents waiting in the lobby. There was only Victor holding the car door, and Elaine adjusting a pillow behind my back. On the drive, I watched familiar streets pass by, and I felt strange grief for the life I thought I had. At Victor home, they set up a quiet room with fresh sheets, a small lamp, and water on the nightstand. Elaine placed my prescriptions in a neat row, and she told me to rest without apologizing. That first night, I woke up sweating from a nightmare, and Victor was there in the hallway, still awake. He asked if I was in pain, and I told him I was in shock. He nodded, then said something that surprised me. He said, "Daniel and Karen will pretend none of this matters until it costs them something." He said, "Brooke will keep shaping the story because her image depends on it." He told me I do not have to chase their love anymore, because love does not run away from a hospital. The next morning, Victor placed a small metal key in my palm. He said it was for a townhouse nearby, one he owned free and clear. He said I could stay there when I was stronger, so I would have peace and privacy. I tried to refuse, and my voice cracked because I was not used to receiving without earning. Victor told me to stop, and he said you earned it by surviving. Elena added that support is not a debt, it is a choice. My eyes filled and I looked down at the key, feeling its weight. It was not just a key, it was a door out of the old pattern. I asked Victor why he was doing all this after being pushed out of the family. Victor said because you were a kid when they made their choices, and you should not pay for their pride. He paused, then said there is more you need to know, but we will talk when you can breathe without pain. I nodded, clutching the key, and for the first time since the grocery store, I believed that my life might still be mine. 2 days later, when my strength came back in small pieces, Victor Reyes sat with me at the kitchen table. Elaine Parker poured tea, then left us space, staying close, but not hovering. Victor told me he needed to explain why my parents cut him off, and why he never reached out sooner. He said Daniel Reyes built his identity on control, and anyone who questioned him became the enemy. Years ago, Victor challenged Daniel about money, and about the way Karen Reyes looked away. Victor said he refused to pretend everything was fine, and Daniel punished him by erasing him. Victor told me he tried to stay in contact with me, quietly, but Brooke Reyes blocked messages, and Karen said it was complicated. Victor looked at me and apologized, saying he should have pushed harder. Then he opened a folder and slid papers toward me, neat and organized. He said, "There is a legal structure in place, an irrevocable trust, managed by a professional, Harper Sloan." Victor said he created it to protect assets from manipulation and to protect a beneficiary from family pressure. I asked who the beneficiary was, even though my gut already knew. Victor answered, "It is you, Camilla Reyes. You are the only one." The room felt like it tilted again, not from sickness, but from shock. Victor explained that the trust included properties, savings, and long-term protections. He said it was designed so nobody could bully you into signing control away. He also said Daniel and Karen would never tell you the truth about your worth, because they liked you dependent. Victor told me to breathe, then said, "We will move slowly. No one needs to know yet." Elaine returned and placed a small plate of toast near me, like ordinary food could anchor impossible news. I stared at the papers, and I felt anger rise, not at Victor, but at the years I spent begging for basic care. Victor said the trust is not a prize, it is a shield. He said you were abandoned in a hospital, and that is why I am done pretending. As my recovery continued, I learned how quiet cruelty can be. Brooke Reyes kept posting cheerful photos, brunch plates, smiling faces, family captions. Daniel Reyes and Karen Reyes appeared in the background, looking relaxed, like nothing happened. Then Brooke posted a longer message, describing me as unstable, distant, and dramatic. She wrote that the family had tried for years, and that I pushed them away. She asked people to respect privacy, while inviting sympathy in the same breath. I felt sick reading it, because it was clean, and believable, and false. Victor Reyes told me not to respond emotionally. He said we document, we save screenshots, we collect dates, and we protect you first. Harper Sloan emailed Victor a brief outline explaining the trust rules and the privacy boundaries. Harper said the structure prevents unauthorized access, and it limits what family can demand. Elaine Parker helped me set my phone to block unknown numbers because relatives started calling. Some asked if I was okay, but most asked why I was causing drama. One cousin said Daniel is heartbroken, and I should apologize. I said Daniel did not come to the hospital, and the line went quiet. A week later, I took my first short walk outside, moving slowly, breathing carefully. Victor walked beside me, matching my pace, saying nothing until I spoke. I told him I felt humiliated, like my family turned my surgery into gossip. Victor said people who abandon you often need you to look wrong. That way, they do not have to look cruel. That sentence stayed with me because it explained so much of my childhood. Later, Elaine helped me practice a simple response for anyone who tried to bait me. She told me to say, "I am focusing on healing, and I will not discuss private matters." Then stop. Bite. I repeated it until it felt like armor. Each time I refused to argue, the noise around me weakened. Not because they changed, but because I stopped feeding the story they wanted. When my strength improved, Victor Reyes set up a call with Harper Sloan. Harper's voice was calm, professional, and direct. Harper explained that the trust was irrevocable, meaning Victor could not simply undo it, and neither could anyone else. "Harper," said the beneficiary, "is Camila Reyes, and the benefit is protected by clear terms." Harper described how distributions work, how property maintenance is handled, and how requests are reviewed. Harper also explained why this matters. Because once Daniel Reyes and Karen Reyes discover it, they will likely pressure you. Harper said pressure often arrives disguised as love, then shifts into guilt, then becomes threat. Hearing that made my stomach tighten, because it sounded like my whole life. Victor told Harper about the hospital call and about Brooke Reyes' refusal. Harper paused, then said, "This confirms the risk level." Harper recommended that we keep the trust private until I was fully stable. Harper also suggested a simple legal letter stating that harassment or false statements would be documented. Victor agreed, and Elaine Parker nodded from across the room. After the call, I sat quietly, feeling both safer and sadder. Safer because someone planned for my protection. Sadder because my parents never did. Victor said, "We will take one step at a time." He said, "First you heal, then you move into the townhouse, then you rebuild your life." He said, "If your family comes back later, it will not be for you, it will be for access." I asked Victor if I should confront them now. Victor said not yet, because you do not owe them a performance. He said the best revenge is stability, and the best boundary is silence with receipts. I looked down at my hands, still thin and bruised from needles, and I realized I had spent years trying to be chosen. Now, I needed to choose myself, even if it felt unfamiliar. A month after surgery, my strength returned in slow, uneven waves. Some mornings I felt steady, and some afternoons I needed to lie down after folding one basket of laundry. Victor Reyes kept my schedule organized, and Elaine Parker made the days feel gentle with simple meals and quiet routines. When my doctor approved a change of environment, Victor drove me to the townhouse and handed me the key again. The place was small, clean, and calm, with sunlight in the kitchen and a soft hush in the hallway. Elaine helped stock the fridge, then left me alone with a hug that felt like permission to breathe. That first night I sat on the couch and listened to silence, real silence, not the tense quiet of my childhood. I checked my phone once, expecting a message from Karen Reyes or a call from Daniel Reyes, something that acknowledged I survived. There was nothing. Brooke Reyes posted another photo, smiling with my parents at a weekend market, captioned about gratitude and fresh starts. I stared at it, then set the phone down because it felt like staring at a wall. Victor told me this is their strategy. If they do not look at your pain, they can pretend it does not exist. I focused on healing instead. I started cardiac rehab twice a week, and I learned to trust my body again. On days when fear hit, I repeated what Elaine taught me. I am safe. I am healing. I owe nobody a fight. Harper Sloan checked in through email, reminding Victor about documentation and privacy. Victor installed a door camera and changed my locks. Not because I was paranoid, but because boundaries are easier to keep when you feel secure. One afternoon, a neighbor mentioned seeing my parents nearby, and my stomach tightened. Victor investigated quietly, and it turned out Daniel and Karen were at a restaurant 2 blocks away, not looking for me, just living. The indifference hurt more than anger. Still, I began to see the new shape of my life. I had a home that did not depend on their mood, and I had people who showed up without demanding payment. The old story said I was a burden. The new story was proving I was simply neglected. Time passed, and life rebuilt itself in quiet ways. 5 years later, I was 33, working again, and living steadily in the townhouse. My heart condition required careful follow-ups, but I was strong, and I had routines that kept me well. Victor Reyes remained a constant, calling every week, checking in without hovering. Elaine Parker became family in the way my own family never managed. We celebrated small holidays together, and I learned that love can be calm. During those years, Daniel Reyes and Karen Reyes stayed distant. Brooke Reyes only reached out once, sending a message that sounded like a business email, asking if I was alive. I did not reply. I did not owe her proof of existence. Then one afternoon, Victor called and his voice sounded different, strained and slurred. He said he was at the hospital and he had a mild stroke. My chest tightened, but my feet moved before my mind finished thinking. I drove to the hospital and found Elaine sitting in the waiting area, eyes red but steady. She told me Victor was stable and doctors expected recovery with therapy. I sat beside her and held her hand, and I felt fear that was real and sharp. Victor had saved me, and now I needed to be there for him. When I finally saw him, he looked pale, but his eyes were clear. He squeezed my hand and told me not to panic. He asked about my heart even then, and I smiled through tears. I stayed for hours, helping Elaine with paperwork, listening to doctors, and making sure Victor had what he needed. In the middle of that long day, my phone buzzed with a number I had not seen in years. It was Karen Reyes. The timing felt like a punch. I did not answer, and the voicemail came seconds later. Karen's voice sounded sweet, too sweet, saying she heard Victor was ill and she wanted to help. I listened once, then deleted it. Victor looked at me and asked who called. I told him, and his jaw tightened. He said they are not coming to help. They are coming to check the doors. The next morning, Daniel Reyes, Karen Reyes, and Brooke Reyes arrived at the hospital like a coordinated group. They walked into Victor's room with bright smiles, speaking loudly, as if volume could create closeness. Karen rushed to Victor's bedside and grabbed his hand, calling him family, calling him dear. Daniel stood back, scanning the room, eyes moving over the monitors, then over the personal items, like he was measuring value. Brooke hovered near the door, phone in hand, taking in every detail. Elaine Parker stiffened beside me, and I felt heat rise in my chest. Victor looked at them with calm eyes, and he did not smile. Karen asked how he was feeling, then quickly pivoted, asking who was handling his affairs while he recovered. Daniel asked if there were forms they needed to sign to help with decisions. Brooke asked if the doctors had mentioned long-term care, like she was already calculating. I watched them, and I realized none of them asked about the surgery plan, or Victor therapy, or how Elaine was coping. They asked about control. Victor answered politely, saying everything is handled. Daniel frowned and said family should be involved. Elaine stepped forward and said family did not involve itself when Camila almost died. Madame. Karen's face tightened. Then she forced a laugh and said that was complicated. Brooke shrugged and said Camila chose distance. Hearing my name spoken like that, so casual, made my stomach twist. I told them to leave because Victor needed rest. Daniel scoffed and said, "You do not get to order us around." Victor lifted one hand and the room went still. He told Daniel that he is not in charge here. He said he is grateful they visited, but he will not discuss finances. Karen tried to cry, saying she only wants to do the right thing. Victor said the right thing would have been showing up 5 years ago, when your daughter was on an operating table. Brooke rolled her eyes, and Daniel turned red. I could feel the old fear trying to rise, the fear of being blamed. Then I looked at Elaine, and I looked at Victor, and I remembered who actually showed up. I told Daniel and Karen that they can speak with Harper Sloan if they have questions, and then I stepped between them and Victor bed. The visit ended with Karen muttering that this family is broken. Elaine whispered back that they broke it, and now they are surprised the pieces do not obey. That afternoon, Harper Sloan came to the hospital in person. Harper was calm, neatly dressed, and carried a thin folder that looked light but felt heavy in the room. Daniel Reyes tried to take control immediately, standing tall and speaking fast, saying he is Victor Reyes' brother and he needs authority to help. Karen Reyes nodded along, acting worried, while Brooke Reyes watched like she was waiting for her turn. Harper listened without reacting, then asked one question: "Are you asking for medical authority or financial authority?" Daniel hesitated, then tried to say both, because family should handle everything. Harper replied that the medical decisions are already documented and delegated, and the financial structure is separate. Harper explained that Victor has an irrevocable trust with defined roles, and none of them are listed. Karen's smile flickered. Brooke asked who is listed, and Harper answered that the trustee and beneficiary are protected by privacy rules. Daniel pushed harder, saying he deserves to know because he is family. Harper said family status does not override legal documents. Elaine Parker stood beside Victor bed, arms crossed, and I could feel her anger like heat. Harper then said something that made Daniel's face go tight. Harper said, "Victor requested that all questions be routed through legal counsel and that any harassment will be documented." Karen tried to cry, saying they only want to support Victor. Harper replied that support looks like caregiving, not demands for signatures. Brooke stepped forward and asked if Victor is changing his will. Harper said, "Victor has the right to update any personal estate plan, but it is not open for discussion with unapproved parties." Daniel's voice rose, accusing Harper of hiding money. Whoa. Harper did not flinch. Harper said there is no hiding, there is structure, and structure exists because of past behavior. Daniel turned toward me and said, "This is your doing. You poisoned Victor against us." I told him that Victor made his choice the day Brooke told the hospital to remove her number. Karen tried to talk over me, saying that was misunderstood. Elaine said it was not misunderstood, it was recorded. Harper said the meeting is over, and security would be called if needed. Daniel and Karen left with forced smiles that did not reach their eyes. Brooke lingered 1 second, looking at me with cold curiosity, then walked out. When the door closed, Victor exhaled, and his hand squeezed mine. He whispered that they came for control, and now they know there is none. 2 days later, Victor Reyes asked me and Elaine Parker to sit down with him. He spoke slowly because his speech was still recovering, but his mind was clear. He said he wanted one meeting, with witnesses, where the truth could not be twisted later. Harper Sloan arranged it at a conference room in a local law office, quiet and neutral. Victor insisted it be soon, while he still had the strength. Elaine looked nervous, but she agreed. I agreed too, because I was done being rewritten. On the day of the meeting, Daniel Reyes and Karen Reyes arrived, dressed like they were attending a funeral, solemn and dramatic. Brooke Reyes arrived last, eyes sharp, phone tucked away, acting calm. Harper was there, along with another attorney and a notary, because Victor wanted everything documented. Victor sat at the head of the table, posture careful, face tired, but eyes steady. He began by stating facts, that he was the emergency contact for Camila Reyes, that he approved my surgery, and that my parents refused to come. Daniel tried to interrupt, saying that was complicated. Victor raised his hand, and Daniel stopped. Victor, said Brooke, spoke to a nurse and told them I was not her problem. Brooke rolled her eyes and said that was taken out of context. Harper placed a printed note on the table, showing the timestamp and the summary, written by staff. Brooke's face tightened. Victor then said he built protections because he has seen how this family uses pressure. Karen started crying, saying she was always there in her heart. Victor asked Karen why she posted happy photos while I was in intensive care. Karen said she was trying to stay positive. Victor said positivity is not love. Presence is love. Daniel accused Victor of turning against blood, and Victor answered that blood did not show up for Camila. Then Victor said the part they all came for. He said his trust and estate plans are structured so that Camila is protected and that no one else will control it. Daniel leaned forward, demanding numbers. Harper refused. Brooke asked if Camila owns property now. Harper said that discussion is not for you. The room shifted because they realized they were not being invited into the vault. Victor then gave them a choice. He said they could stop lying publicly, remove false posts, and publish a correction, or Victor would allow the documentation to be released in a formal setting. Karen looked panicked. Daniel looked furious. Brooke looked calculating. Victor's voice stayed steady as he said, "Consequences are real now, and the story ends here." After the meeting, Daniel Reyes tried to corner me in the hallway, but Elaine Parker stepped between us. Daniel hissed that I owe him answers, and I told him I owe him nothing. Karen Reyes followed, crying softly, saying she just wants her daughter back. I told Karen that a mother who wants her daughter back does not ignore a hospital call and does not let her other child erase her. Brooke Reyes stayed near the door, arms folded, watching. She said I always loved drama. And she said Victor was sick and confused. I told Brooke that the only confusion was hers because she thought people would keep forgiving her. Harper Sloan handed Daniel a formal letter outlining Victor terms. The letter required 3 things. Brooke must remove the false posts. Daniel and Karen must stop contacting my employer and friends, and they must publish a clear correction stating they were not present during my surgery and recovery. If they refused, Victor would pursue legal remedies and public documentation. Daniel laughed bitterly, then said this is extortion. Harper replied that it is boundary setting and they are free to refuse, but they are not free from consequences. Karen looked at me and asked if I would forgive them if they complied. I answered honestly, compliance is not repair, it is a minimum. I said, trust is rebuilt with time and with actions that do not require applause. Daniel scoffed and said, you think you are better than us now? I said no. I think I am safer without you. That sentence landed hard, because it was true. Brooke muttered that she will never apologize publicly. Victor, hearing raised voices, came to the doorway with Elaine's support. He looked at Brooke and said, then you will live with your choice, and you will not touch what I built. Brooke stared at him, shocked that her usual charm did not work. Daniel grabbed Karen's arm, and they walked away, angry and embarrassed. Brooke followed, head high, but her shoulders were tight. When they were gone, I felt shaky, not from fear, but from adrenaline leaving my body. Elaine hugged me, and Harper nodded once, like a professional closing a file. Victor sat back down, tired, and he said quietly that this is what accountability looks like. I looked at him and realized my whole life I waited for my parents to choose me. Now I was choosing peace, even if it cost me the illusion of family. In the week after the law office meeting, my family tried to regain the narrative again. Daniel Reyes told relatives that Victor Reyes was being manipulated, and that I was using his illness to steal from the family. Karen Reyes called distant cousins crying, saying she was punished for loving her daughter too much. Brooke Reyes posted a vague message about being attacked for setting boundaries, and people who did not know the truth offered sympathy. The pattern was familiar: deny, distort, then recruit an audience. Harper Sloan advised me not to respond publicly because public arguments feed their story. Harper said, "Truth travels slower than lies, but it lasts longer." Victor was still in recovery, doing therapy each day, pushing through fatigue. Elaine Parker kept the house calm, managing schedules and shielding him from stress. I visited often, bringing soup, sitting quietly, letting Victor rest. One afternoon, a cousin called me and asked if I was really taking advantage of Victor. I took a breath and gave a short answer. I said Victor saved my life when my sister refused the hospital call, and I said the records exist. The cousin went silent, then said, "Brooke never mentioned that." I said, "Brooke never mentions what makes her look cruel." After that call, I felt the old urge to defend myself to everyone. Then I looked at Victor, working on speech exercises, and I remembered I did not owe the world an explanation. I owed myself peace. Harper sent another letter, reminding Daniel and Karen that continued defamation could lead to action. They did not stop, but their circle of supporters got smaller as more people learned the timeline. The more they spoke, the more cracks showed. Meanwhile, my life stayed steady. I went to follow-up cardiology visits, stayed consistent with medication, and kept my townhouse quiet and safe. I realized something that surprised me. Their noise did not feel as powerful anymore, because I had proof, and I had people who were not afraid to stand with me. Victor told me one night that his biggest regret was not protecting me sooner. I told him he protected me when it mattered most. We sat in silence for a while, and it felt like family, the kind that does not demand performance. 2 weeks later, Karen Reyes tried a direct approach. She showed up at my townhouse, standing outside my door like she belonged there. The camera caught her crying, holding a small bag, and looking up as if she was praying for sympathy. I did not open the door. I spoke through the speaker and told her she had to leave. Karen said she just wanted to talk, and she said she was sorry. I asked her what she was sorry for. Karen paused, then said she was sorry that everything got so dramatic. She did not say she was sorry for ignoring the hospital. She did not say she was sorry for letting Brooke erase me. So I told Karen the truth. A real apology names the harm. Karen started crying harder and said, "Daniel made everything difficult, and she was only trying to keep peace." I told her peace that abandons your daughter is not peace. Karen then tried the old pull, saying, "You have family, you have history, you cannot throw that away." I said history is not a reason to accept harm again. Karen asked if she could at least see Victor, and I told her Victor is protected, and she can speak through Harper Sloan. Karen looked angry for a second, then forced a sad expression again. She said, "You are cold now." I replied that cold is hanging up on a hospital. Karen left, but she did not leave quietly. She told a neighbor that I was cruel. I documented it, then went back inside and made tea, because I was done letting her set my nervous system on fire. That same day, Brooke called from an unknown number. Her voice was tight and defensive. She said she never expected Victor to choose me over the family. She said the trust should belong to everyone, because it was built from family legacy. I told her legacy does not include abandoning someone on an operating table. Brooke snapped that she was scared, and she did not want responsibility. I told her fear does not excuse cruelty. Brooke went quiet, then asked if I would stop if she deleted her posts. I told her deleting is not enough. She must correct the lie. Brooke cursed, then hung up. After the call, I felt shaky, but also clear. They were not reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because the doors stayed closed. A month after Victor Reyes' stroke, he was stronger. His speech improved, his grip steadier, and his eyes sharper. He asked Harper Sloan to schedule a final meeting, not to negotiate, but to close the loop. Daniel Reyes, Karen Reyes, and Brooke Reyes arrived again, this time less confident. The room was the same neutral office, the same table, the same documents. Victor opened with one sentence, "I am alive, and I am thinking clearly." Daniel tried to argue that Victor was under pressure, but Victor cut him off. Victor said the pressure came from them, not from me. He said he watched them ignore Camila, then rewrite it, then show up only when money appeared. Karen cried and said she wanted her daughter back. Victor asked her where she was when Camila was dying. Karen did not answer. Brooke said she did not mean it, and she was young and overwhelmed. Victor reminded her that she was an adult when she told the nurse to remove her number. Harper placed the staff note on the table again, timestamp visible. The silence was thick. Victor then offered terms one last time. Public correction, no more harassment, and respect for boundaries. In return, Victor would not pursue further action, and he would allow supervised contact with me in the future if I ever wanted it. Daniel laughed bitterly and said, "You cannot control us." Victor answered that he already did, by removing incentives. Brooke looked at Karen, and Karen looked at Daniel, and the truth surfaced. They wanted access more than repair. Daniel refused to sign anything. Ow! Brooke refused to post a correction. Karen begged me to override Victor, and I told her I could not override my own self-respect. I said if they cannot tell the truth, then they cannot be in my life. Victor nodded once, and he said, "Then the meeting is over." As they left, Daniel called me ungrateful. I did not respond. Elaine Parker squeezed my shoulder, and Harper gathered the papers like closing a door. Outside, the sunlight hit my face, and I felt something like freedom. I did not get the family I wanted, but I got the life I deserved, steady, protected, and finally mine. After the second meeting, the silence lasted only a few days. Then the consequences arrived. Daniel Reyes started calling relatives again, but the tone changed, less anger, more panic. Karen Reyes texted strangers from borrowed numbers, asking for help, asking for prayers, asking for someone to talk sense into me. Brooke Reyes stopped posting cheerful messages because people began asking hard questions. A neighbor told me Daniel had been seen arguing with a lender on the phone outside his own house. The truth was simple. When Victor Reyes stopped being a door they could push, their old safety net disappeared. Elaine Parker heard from a mutual friend that Daniel was behind on payments, and the bank had sent a formal warning. When I heard that, I felt no joy, only a tired clarity. They did not ignore my surgery because they were busy. They ignored it because I was not useful. Now they were frightened because they could not reach what they wanted. Ow. Karen showed up again at my townhouse, this time without tears at first. She demanded that I talk, and when I refused, she switched to crying fast. She said the house could be taken, and she said it would be my fault if they ended up with nowhere to go. I told her calmly that I did not create their finances, and I did not sign their loans. Karen, said family, does not let family fall, and I said family does not abandon a daughter on an operating table. Karen froze. Then her face tightened because she had no answer. She laughed, but she spoke loudly enough for a neighbor to hear, calling me heartless. I documented it and sent the note to Harper Sloan. Harper replied with one sentence, "Keep doing exactly what you are doing." Victor called me that night, voice steadier now, and told me not to carry their fear. He said Daniel will use desperation like a weapon, and Karen will use guilt like a rope. Victor told me he built protections for a reason, because love without accountability becomes a trap. I sat in my quiet living room, heart beating steady, and I realized something important. I could feel compassion for them, without reopening the door to harm. A week later, Victor Reyes asked me to come to his house for dinner. Just me, him, and Elaine Parker. He looked stronger, and his eyes were focused, like he had made a decision. Victor said he did not want Daniel Reyes and Karen Reyes sleeping in a car because he did not want cruelty to continue in another direction. But he also said he would not reward lies, and he would not hand them control. Victor explained that the trust held several properties, and one small rental house had been empty for months. He said he was willing to offer Daniel and Karen a lease, a real contract with real rent and clear rules. Elaine nodded, saying shelter can be offered without surrender. Victor said the rules mattered. Daniel and Karen would have to sign a standard lease, pay rent on time, and stop harassing me. Brooke Reyes would have to remove the false posts and publish a correction stating that they were not present during my surgery and that Victor stepped in. Victor said if they refused, then they could figure out their own housing like adults. If they agreed, then they would have stability, but not access. I asked Victor why he would do even that, after everything. Victor said, because I want the story to end clean, without more damage. He said, I will not let them say they were abandoned, when they are facing the consequences of abandonment. Harper Sloan drafted the lease terms, and also drafted a separate behavior agreement. Harper made it simple, clear, and enforceable. Victor told me he would offer it once and only once. Elaine reached across the table and squeezed my hand, reminding me that boundaries are not hate. Boundaries are how you keep your heart alive. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness, because this was not reconciliation. This was a controlled exit from a toxic loop. Victor called Daniel and offered the terms. Daniel tried to argue for free housing, and Victor said no. Karen tried to cry and ask for family mercy, and Victor said, mercy comes with truth. Brooke tried to ask if I would meet her if they signed, and I said no, not yet. In the end, they asked for 24 hours to decide. Victor agreed, and then he looked at me and said, whatever they choose, you stay safe. The next evening, Harper Sloan forwarded me a screenshot of Brooke Reyes' new post. Brooke wrote a correction, short and stiff, admitting that Victor Reyes handled my emergency surgery and that my parents were not present. She did not sound sorry, but the lie was finally punctured. Daniel Reyes and Karen Reyes signed the lease the following day, faces tight, pride bruised. They moved into the rental quietly, because public pity was harder to perform now. Victor kept his distance, and Elaine Parker handled communication through Harper, so there were no messy conversations. The first month rent arrived on time, and I felt a strange calm, because structure was doing what emotions never could. Karen attempted to call me once, saying she wanted to talk like mother and daughter. I did not respond. Daniel tried to send a message asking if I could visit, to make things feel normal again. I did not respond. Harper reminded them that contact requires consent, and consent requires respect. Brooke tried to push again, asking if the correction was enough. I answered through Harper, saying enough is not a post. Enough is years of consistent change. Victor told me I handled it well, because I did not confuse compliance with love. He said, truth is the floor, not the ceiling. Over time, the noise around me softened. Some relatives apologized quietly, after they saw the correction. Others stayed loyal to the old story, and I let them go. My life remained steady, built on quiet mornings, medical follow-ups, and peace in my own home. I visited Victor and Elaine often, because they were my real safety net. One night, Victor looked at me and said, "You survived the surgery, but you also survived the family that made you feel disposable." He said, "That is strength no one can take." I walked home under a calm sky, and I felt my heart beating, steady and sure. I was no longer asking to be chosen. I was choosing my life, and that choice had finally become permanent. In the months after the lease began, the world got quieter. Daniel Reyes and Karen Reyes paid rent, and they stayed in their lane. They did not like it, but structure left them fewer openings. Brooke Reyes stopped posting about family loyalty because the correction post changed the comments. People began asking where they were during my surgery, and she had no clean answer. A few relatives apologized, not loudly, but sincerely, and I accepted it with caution. Others stayed distant, and I let that be their choice. Harper Sloan kept everything formal, and any message that crossed a boundary was answered counsel. Victor Reyes recovered steadily, doing therapy, walking longer each week, and smiling more often. Elaine Parker kept the home calm, and she kept reminding me that peace is a practice. I focused on my health because my heart did not forgive stress easily. I went to follow-ups, stayed consistent with medication, and kept my townhouse simple. When loneliness hit, I invited it to pass through, instead of chasing old pain for company. One afternoon, Karen tried again, leaving a note at my door. She wrote that she missed me, and she wanted a fresh start. She did not mention the hospital, and she did not mention Brooke hanging up. She wanted the comfort of reunion, without the cost of accountability. I did not respond. I sent a photo of the note to Harper, and Harper filed it. That night, Victor called and asked how I felt. I told him I felt sad, but steady. Victor said sadness is normal, because you lost a fantasy, not a real relationship. He said, "The truth is, you are building something better, and you do not have to earn it by bleeding." I sat on my couch, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. I realized I had not checked Brooke's social media in weeks. That alone felt like healing. The old me would have hunted for evidence of love. The new me was living without asking for proof from people who already showed me who they are. A few weeks later, Brooke Reyes showed up at my townhouse without warning. The camera caught her standing too close to the door, hair perfect, eyes sharp. She knocked twice, then spoke my name like she owned it. I did not open the door. I spoke through the speaker and asked what she wanted. Brooke said she wanted to talk. Just sisters, no lawyers. I asked if she was ready to apologize for hanging up on the hospital. Brooke went quiet, then said, "You do not understand how scary it was." She said the doctors were asking questions, and she did not want the responsibility. I told her fear does not excuse erasing me. Brooke snapped, "That I always make everything about you." She said Daniel and Karen are suffering, and I could fix it with one conversation. I told her I did not break them. I survived them. Brooke tried a softer tone, saying she posted the correction, and that should count for something. I told her the correction was required, and truth under pressure is not the same as remorse. Brooke asked if I hated her. I told her I do not hate her. I do not trust her. Brooke then revealed what she really came for. She asked if I could talk to Victor and convince him to reduce their rent. She said, "Money is tight, and Daniel is stressed." Hearing that, my chest tightened with anger and clarity. Brooke did not come for me. She came for leverage. I told her no, and I told her to leave. Brooke raised her voice, trying to pull neighbors into the scene. She said, "You are heartless, you think you are better now." I said, "You left me alone on an operating table, and you do not get to call me heartless." There was a pause, and I could hear her breathing hard. Then she muttered that Victor poisoned me, and she walked away. I saved the camera clip and sent it to Harper Sloan. I saved. Harper replied that we will add it to the file. After Brooke left, I sat down and felt my hands shake. Not because I regretted it, but because I finally accepted the truth. Brooke does not want repair. She wants access. That acceptance hurt, but it also set me free. Not long after Brooke's visit, Daniel Reyes tested the boundary in a different way. He called Harper Sloan and claimed the lease was unfair, and he demanded a reduction. Harper reminded him that the rent amount was already below market, and the terms were signed voluntarily. Daniel threatened to stop paying, and he said family should not charge family. Harper replied that family should not abandon family, and yet here we are. When Daniel missed a payment by 1 week, Harper issued a formal notice, exactly as the contract allowed. Karen Reyes called Elaine Parker crying, saying they would be thrown out. Elaine told her calmly that consequences are not cruelty, they are structure. Daniel tried to show up at Victor's house, but the security camera caught him at the gate, and Elaine did not open it. Victor called him through the speaker and told him to follow the lease terms, or leave. Daniel shouted that Victor owed him because they share blood. Victor replied that blood is not a password, and he ended the call. Daniel then tried to message me, saying I am causing this. I did not reply. I forwarded it to Harper, and Harper sent Daniel one short warning. Any further contact outside approved channels will be treated as harassment. 2 days later, the rent payment arrived, full amount, and on time. Daniel was not changing. He was adapting. Karen stayed quieter after that, because the threat of eviction was real. Brooke stopped showing up, because the doors stayed closed and the receipts stayed ready. Victor told me that this is how people reveal their priorities. When love fails, responsibility fails too, and what remains is appetite. I looked at my life, at my calm home, at my stable health plan, at the people who showed up. I realized the story was no longer about what my parents refused to do. It was about what I finally chose to do for myself. A month after Daniel Reyes' late payment, Karen Reyes asked for a meeting. Not at my house, not at Victor Reyes' house, but at a small diner near the rental. Harper Sloan advised me to keep it public, keep it short, and keep it documented. I agreed, because I wanted closure, not closeness. Karen arrived first, hands folded, eyes tired, voice soft. She said she was sorry, and she said she missed me. I asked her what she was sorry for, and I waited without rescuing her. Karen hesitated, then said she was sorry that things got messy. She said she never wanted a fight. She still did not name the hospital call. She still did not name the operating table. I told her that missing the point is not an apology. Karen's eyes filled, and she whispered that Daniel scared her, and she did what she could to survive. I told her survival might explain her silence, but it does not erase my abandonment. Karen tried to reach for my hand, and I pulled back gently. She asked if I could forgive her if she just had time. I told her forgiveness is not a shortcut. It is something that grows after truth and after consistent change. Karen said she would do anything. Then she asked if I could talk to Victor about lowering rent again. The question landed like a stone. She did not even realize what she revealed. I looked at her and said, "You are not here for me. You are here for relief." Karen cried harder, then said she was desperate. I told her desperation does not entitle her to my life. I told her the rent contract is separate from me, and she must speak through Harper. Karen asked if she could at least see me more, And I told her not right now. I said if she wants a future, she starts by telling the truth publicly without blaming anyone else. Karen nodded, but her eyes looked uncertain. When we stood to leave, she whispered that she never thought Camila would be the one with power. I answered that it is not power. It is boundaries. I walked out, breathing steady, because for once I did not leave a conversation feeling smaller. As the year moved forward, the focus shifted back to living. Victor Reyes continued therapy, and his progress became visible in small victories. He spoke more clearly, walked farther, and laughed without effort. Elaine Parker started cooking again with joy, filling the house with the smell of herbs and warm bread. I spent weekends there sometimes, helping in the garden, listening to Victor's stories, and feeling safe in a way I never felt growing up. Harper Sloan finalized updates to the trust administration, making sure there were clear procedures if Victor ever had another health event. Harper explained everything to me in plain language, so I could make decisions without fear. That education felt like a gift, because my parents always kept me in the dark. I also began volunteering at a cardiac support group because I knew what it feels like to wake up terrified and alone. I did not share my family's story there, but I shared hope, and that felt like reclaiming my voice. One night, I sat in my townhouse and looked at the scar across my chest in the mirror. I remembered the grocery store aisle, the tunnel of lights, the nurse face after Brooke Reyes hung up. I felt sadness, but it was not sharp anymore. It was a memory, not a weapon. Daniel and Karen still lived in the rental, paying rent on time now, because they learned the contract had teeth. Brooke stayed mostly silent, because her attempts at pressure failed. Every so often, a cousin would message me, asking if I was okay, and I would answer simply, yes, I am safe, and I am healing. I did not argue about the past, because the past was documented and done. Victor told me that peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of clarity. I understood that now. My life was not perfect, but it was mine, and it did not depend on anyone pretending I was worth loving. Late that summer, Daniel Reyes asked for a final meeting. Harper Sloan offered to attend, but I said no because I did not want a negotiation. I agreed only if it was in public, during daylight, and brief. We met at a park with people nearby, an open space around us. Daniel arrived alone, looking older, shoulders tense, eyes restless. He started by saying he never thought things would go this far. He said, "Victor turned me against the family." I told him that Brooke turned the family against me when she hung up on a hospital nurse. Daniel flinched, then said Brooke was overwhelmed. I told him that overwhelmed people still answer calls when someone is dying. Daniel sighed and said, "Karen is suffering," and he said the rental is humiliating. I told him humiliation is not harm. Abandonment is harm. Daniel asked if I felt satisfied. I told him I felt safe, and that is different. Daniel then tried one last angle, saying if I forgive him, we can be a family again. I asked him if he was ready to say publicly that he ignored the hospital calls and that he chose not to come. Daniel stared at the ground, then said that would make him look bad. That was the most honest thing he said all day. I nodded, because it confirmed everything. I told Daniel that if he cannot tell the truth, then there is nothing to rebuild. Daniel's voice rose slightly, saying, "You are cold, you are ungrateful." I did not argue. I told him I hope he finds peace, and I stood up. Daniel called my name once, and I kept walking. Behind me, I heard him exhale hard, like anger and regret fighting for space. I did not turn around. In my chest, my heart beat steady, and I realized silence can be a full sentence. It can mean no, and it can mean enough, and it can mean I choose my life. A year after Victor Reyes' stroke, the season turned again, and life looked different in a quiet way. Victor walked without a cane, spoke with confidence, and laughed like the sound belonged to him. Elaine Parker hosted a small dinner, just the three of us with candles on the table and music low in the background. Harper Sloan stopped by earlier in the day to confirm the final updates. The trust procedures were set, the records were organized, and the boundaries were clear. Harper reminded me that protection is not paranoia. It is preparation. After Harper left, Victor sat with me on the porch and asked how my heart felt, both the medical one and the personal one. I told him my body felt stronger, and my mind felt calmer than it ever did in my parents' house. Daniel Reyes and Karen Reyes still lived in the rental, paying rent on time now because contracts do not care about pride. Brooke Reyes stayed mostly silent because her attempts at control failed, and the correction post remained as a bruise on her image. Sometimes I wondered if they ever felt shame, but I stopped waiting for it. Shame is not my medicine. Victor told me that the day Brooke hung up on the hospital nurse, she did not only abandon me, she revealed the truth. She revealed what they would do when love required effort. He said that truth was painful, but it was also a gift, because it ended the guessing. That night when I drove back to my townhouse, the streets were calm and the air was cool. I parked, walked inside, and felt the familiar quiet wrap around me. I looked at the scar on my chest in the mirror. Then I looked at my own eyes, steady and awake. I realized I was no longer the fragile girl they complained about. I was a woman who survived surgery, survived abandonment, and built a life that does not depend on anyone choosing me. My phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number, asking if we could talk. I did not answer. I blocked it, and I made tea. In the kitchen light, I understood the ending clearly. The story did not end when my parents finally paid rent, or when Brooke posted a correction. It ended when I stopped chasing people who ignored me, and started honoring the people who showed up. Victor and Elaine gave me safety. Harper gave me structure, and I gave myself permission to live. That is the ending they cannot rewrite, because it is built on truth, and truth does not need their approval. A year after Victor Reyes' stroke, the season turned again, and life looked different in a quiet way. Victor walked without a cane, spoke with confidence, and laughed like the sound belonged to him. Elaine Parker hosted a small dinner, just the three of us with candles on the table and music low in the background. Harper Sloan stopped by earlier in the day to confirm the final updates. The trust procedures were set, the records were organized, and the boundaries were clear. Harper reminded me that protection is not paranoia. It is preparation. After Harper left, Victor sat with me on the porch and asked how my heart felt, both the medical one and the personal one. I told him my body felt stronger, and my mind felt calmer than it ever did in my parents' house. Daniel Reyes and Karen Reyes still lived in the rental, paying rent on time now, because contracts do not care about pride. Brooke Reyes stayed mostly silent, because her attempts at control failed, and the correction post remained as a bruise on her image. Sometimes I wondered if they ever felt shame, but I stopped waiting for it. Shame is not my medicine. Victor told me that the day Brooke hung up on the hospital nurse, she did not only abandon me, she revealed the truth. She revealed what they would do when love required effort. He said that truth was painful, but it was also a gift, because it ended the guessing. That night, when I drove back to my townhouse, the streets were calm and the air was cool. I parked, walked inside, and felt the familiar quiet wrap around me. I looked at the scar on my chest in the mirror. Then I looked at my own eyes, steady and awake. I realized I was no longer the fragile girl they complained about. I was a woman who survived surgery, survived abandonment, and built a life that does not depend on anyone choosing me. My phone buzzed once, a message from an unknown number, asking if we could talk. I did not answer. I blocked it, and I made tea. In the kitchen light, I understood the ending clearly. The story did not end when my parents finally paid rent, or when Brooke posted a correction. It ended when I stopped chasing people who ignored me, and started honoring the people who showed up. Victor and Elaine gave me safety. Harper gave me structure, and I gave myself permission to live. That is the ending they cannot rewrite, because it is built on truth, and truth does not need their approval.